My name is Jake Reynolds. I'm 34 years old, living in Seattle, and for the last 8 years, I've been working as a sales director at a fast-growing tech company. I'm not going to lie, I loved my job. I poured my heart and soul into every deal, every late night, every tough negotiation. I believed in what we were building. 2 months ago, I closed the biggest deal of my career, a $2 million contract with one of the top clients we'd ever landed. It was a game changer, not just for me, but for the whole company. The deal was so big that everyone at the office knew about it. My boss even called me into his office and said, "Jake, this is exactly the kind of business we need. You're killing it." That feeling, the pride, the validation, it was like nothing else. So, imagine my shock when, just a few weeks later, I got a call from Human Resources. The message was clear and brutal. I was fired. Just like that. Because I had the audacity to interview for another job during my vacation day. You heard that right. After bringing in $2 million of new business, after putting in years of hard work, they decided to fire me because I was looking out for myself during my own time off. It felt like a punch to the gut. But that wasn't even the worst part. What hurt the most was the way it happened. No warning. No chance to explain. Just a cold, automated email from HR, followed by a short, awkward conversation with my boss where he barely looked me in the eye. He said, "We can't have someone on the team who isn't fully committed." It was like a betrayal from someone I trusted, someone I thought had my back. I kept thinking, how could this happen? After everything I did for this company, is this how it ends? That day, as I packed up my things from my desk, I felt more than just anger or disappointment. I felt like my entire world was shaking. But deep down, I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't the end of my story. This was the beginning of something much bigger. Before all this chaos, I thought my life was on the right track. I wasn't just some corporate drone grinding away mindlessly. I was a guy with a plan, a family to support, dreams to chase, and a job I genuinely cared about. Seattle was home. I loved waking up early, grabbing my coffee from the corner cafe, and heading to the office with a sense of purpose. For years, I worked late nights and weekends. I missed birthdays and family dinners, not because I wanted to, but because I felt the pressure to prove myself. The tech world is brutal like that. If you don't hustle, you get left behind. My wife, Emily, was my biggest supporter. She knew how much this job meant to me. She'd say, "Jake, you're doing great. This is your moment." And honestly, I believed her. I believed that if I gave everything to the company, my time, my ideas, my energy, they would recognize it. That my loyalty would pay off someday. When the $2 million deal finally closed, it felt like that day had arrived. I remember the long negotiations, countless calls, dozens of emails, traveling back and forth to meet the client. It wasn't easy, but I loved every second of it. It was the challenge I'd been waiting for. When the contract was signed, I felt invincible. I thought my boss would finally see me as the star player I'd become. But I was wrong. Looking back, maybe the first red flag was the way my boss started acting afterward. He became distant, shorter with his emails, colder in meetings. One day, he called me into his office just to ask about some minor mistake in a report, something I barely noticed. The tone wasn't just about the mistake, it was almost hostile. I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe he was stressed. But there were other signs too. Like the time I overheard him talking on the phone about someone looking for new opportunities, and his voice was sharp, almost bitter. Or the fact that my vacation request, which had always been approved easily before, suddenly got delayed approval and extra scrutiny. Still, I pushed those feelings aside. I told myself, "Jake, keep your head down. Work harder. Prove them wrong." And then came the vacation I'd been looking forward to for months. A week off to clear my head, spend time with Emily and our daughter, and maybe, just maybe, finally relax. But even on vacation, a little voice inside me whispered, "What if this isn't the place for me anymore?" That's when I started casually looking for other jobs. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I wanted to protect myself. I scheduled a few interviews, discreet, respectful, during my own time. I never imagined that this would be the spark that lit the fuse to the end of my career there. I thought I was just preparing for the worst. But I had no idea how quickly the worst was about to find me. It felt like the ground beneath me had started to crack, and I was standing right on the edge. After I booked those interviews, I didn't say a word to anyone. Not to my boss, not to Emily, not even to my closest friends. I kept it all locked inside, like a secret ticking time bomb. But then things started changing, little things at first, almost easy to ignore. At work, my boss's coldness became more obvious. Meetings where I used to get genuine feedback turned into silent stares and clipped comments. My emails went unanswered for hours, sometimes days. The usual friendly, "Hey Jake," greetings disappeared completely. I told myself to stay calm. Maybe it's just a bad week, I thought. But the weight in my chest grew heavier every day. At home, things weren't perfect either. Emily had been distant lately, more distracted, less talkative. Our conversations got shorter, and when I tried to ask what was wrong, she brushed it off with a quick, "Nothing, I'm just tired." One night, I noticed something odd on her phone. The way she quickly silenced it when I entered the room, the way she guarded it like it was a secret vault. It wasn't like Emily to be so secretive. I tried to ignore it, but the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't let me. I started watching more closely, not out of mistrust, but out of self-preservation. I saw her texting late at night, the screen lighting up in the dark at exactly 2:07 a.m. once, twice, 3 times. I couldn't make out the messages, but just the timing felt wrong. She was coming home later than usual, saying she was working late, but when I called her at those times, she wouldn't answer. The more I observed, the more I realized I was being shut out. From her, from my job, from the life I thought I had. The bills started piling up too. Our savings, which I thought were stable, were draining faster than usual. When I asked, Emily said it was unexpected expenses, nothing to worry about. But I could feel the tension tightening like a noose around my neck. At work, rumors began swirling. Quiet whispers in the hallways. "Jake's not a team player," one said. "He's looking for other jobs," another whispered. I knew they were watching me, waiting for me to slip up. But I stayed silent. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't react. Because deep down I was gathering strength. I was waiting for the moment I could finally act. Still, every day was a battle. Balancing the stress of work, the tension at home, and the fear of losing everything. Then came the moment I couldn't ignore anymore. One evening, I was working late at the office when my phone buzzed. It was Emily. But she wasn't texting me, she was sending pictures. Photos of my boss, with another woman. The realization hit me like a freight train. While I was working my ass off to close that $2 million deal, my boss was living a secret life, betraying the trust of the entire company. I sat there, frozen. But there was no time to get mad. Not yet. Because the bigger betrayal was yet to come, and it was about to hit me where it hurt the most. I stayed silent. But I started watching. Then one night, her phone lit up at 2:07 a.m. That night, everything changed. I had been holding on to suspicion for weeks, but that one moment, that single undeniable proof, shattered whatever hope I had left. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a loud argument. It was quiet, cold, and devastating. I was going through some files on my laptop, trying to keep my mind busy when I saw a notification pop up on my screen, an email from the company's finance department. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a detailed expense report, with several large sums of money unaccounted for. I knew exactly where to look next. I dug deeper and found a series of emails between my boss and a vendor, emails that clearly showed kickbacks and shady deals. But the real shock came when I realized the dates matched perfectly with the timing of my vacation. While I was away, supposedly out of office, my boss was quietly siphoning off company funds. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Not only was he betraying the company, but he was also using my vacation, the one I had earned and planned carefully, as his cover. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding, eyes stinging. At that moment, I knew something else. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to plead or beg. I was going to fight. I started drafting a plan right then and there. I deleted no evidence. I didn't send any emails out of anger. I was calm, collected, like a soldier preparing for battle. I made a list of everything I needed to gather: financial records, email chains, witnesses. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I reached out to a trusted lawyer friend, someone who had dealt with corporate fraud cases before. I told him everything: the betrayal, the shady deals, the cover-up. He listened patiently, then told me to keep everything confidential until we had solid proof. I swallowed my pride and waited, but inside I was burning with a quiet rage, the kind that doesn't shout but moves mountains. That night, I didn't cry. I started planning. I didn't cry that night. I started planning. The days after that night were some of the hardest I've ever faced. But they were also the most important. I wasn't just angry, I was determined. Every step I took was precise, calculated, and silent. First, I created a secure folder on my laptop, locked with a password only I knew. That folder became my vault for every piece of evidence I could find. I started going through company files, emails, bank statements, and expense reports. I copied anything suspicious, anything out of place. It was tedious, exhausting work, but I didn't let myself stop. At home, I kept my focus tight. No more distractions. I didn't want Emily or anyone else to notice my plan. I was careful with what I said and did. I even started working late hours at the office, but not for my boss, for myself. I knew the company was at risk, and so was my career. Then came the toughest part: reaching out for help. I contacted my lawyer friend again. We met in a quiet coffee shop, far from prying eyes. I showed him the files, the emails, the proof of kickbacks and fraud. He nodded slowly. "This is solid," he said. "But we need to be careful. One wrong move and you could lose everything." I understood the risk, but I was ready. We made a plan that I would collect witness statements from coworkers who had noticed strange behavior. I'd get copies of security footage from the office, anything that could show unauthorized meetings or secret exchanges. I even started quietly contacting some vendors, asking questions without raising suspicion. All the while, I kept my cool. I knew this wasn't a battle to win with anger or shouting. This was a war of patience, strategy, and cold calculation. At work, my boss didn't suspect a thing. He acted as if everything was normal, smiling, talking, pretending to be in control. But behind the scenes, I was building my case. Every night, after I left the office, I added more evidence to my vault. Slowly but surely, the pieces were coming together. I also started preparing myself mentally. I knew this fight would change my life forever. I thought about the $2 million deal I had brought in, how I'd been loyal, hardworking, and dedicated. And now, here I was, fighting to save not just my job, but my dignity. I told myself to stay patient, to stay calm, because when the time came, I would make sure justice was served without a single misstep. She thought I'd never fight back, but she forgot I've been trained to win wars without raising my voice. The day finally came. I walked into the conference room where the entire executive team had gathered. My boss was there, confident, smug, unaware of the storm about to hit him. I took a deep breath and began. I didn't yell. I didn't shout. I spoke clearly and calmly, letting the evidence do the talking. First, I laid out the timeline, how I had brought in over $2 million in new business, the hard work I'd put in, and how I had planned my vacation to recharge. Then I shifted the focus. I showed the expense reports, the suspicious transfers, the unexplained withdrawals during my absence. I played the emails, the exchanges between my boss and the vendor, the clear kickbacks, the attempts to cover it up, The room grew silent. Eyes widened. Some people whispered. My boss's face drained of color. I held up the audio recording I had secretly made during one of his off-the-record conversations, where he spoke openly about using my vacation as a cover. The truth is here, I said, voice steady. Not just in papers, but in voices. He tried to deny it, but no one believed him. The legal team stepped in, the HR director called the police, and the investigation began immediately. Through it all, I stayed composed.
Because this wasn't about revenge fueled by anger. This was about justice. I watched as my boss's carefully constructed facade crumbled. And with it, my own doubts and fears disappeared. When the hearing ended, the verdict was clear. My boss was fired, terminated for gross misconduct and fraud. I was reinstated, my reputation restored. But more than that, I felt a deep satisfaction, a quiet victory won through patience, strategy, and strength. I didn't have to shout or fight. I just let the truth speak. The courtroom went silent. I played the audio file, and everyone heard what she really thought of me. Months have passed since the storm settled. The office feels different now, quieter, cleaner, more honest. I rebuilt what was broken, not just at work, but inside myself. Losing my job over a vacation day felt like the end of everything. But it wasn't. It was the beginning of something new. I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean fighting loud or fast. Sometimes it means being patient, collecting your strength, and striking with precision. I found peace not in revenge, but in reclaiming my dignity. Today, I wake up with a sense of purpose. The $2 million deal I brought in? It wasn't just about numbers. It was about proving my worth to myself and to those who doubted me. I've become stronger, wiser, and more resilient. And I want you to know, no matter how unfair life seems, no matter who tries to push you down, you have the power to rise again, to fight back with your mind, your heart, and your spirit. Because in the end, she took everything except my soul, and from that, I rebuilt my life, not for her, not for revenge, but for me. If you've ever been betrayed, hurt, or underestimated, remember this story. Remember that justice isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet voice inside you that never gives up. Thank you for listening to my story. If you want to hear more real stories of people who faced impossible battles and won, hit that subscribe button and join this community. We're here to lift each other up, to inspire, and to remind you that no matter what, your story isn't over.